Hello and welcome to Made It in the States, the number one resource for finding and supporting American made products. My name is Ben Newman and I'm your host. We will be telling the stories of companies producing products here domestically. We truly believe that there is a knowledge gap issue. There are plenty of companies that are producing products right here in America. However, it is too challenging for the everyday consumer to find and support those businesses. We are here to change that. Every week, we will be talking to a new owner or CEO and learning about their story, their struggles, their triumphs, and why they are continuing to produce products right here in the United States. We are so incredibly excited to have you along for this journey. If you enjoy the podcast, please like and subscribe, as well as leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. On today's episode, we are going to be talking to Gina Thorsen. Gina is the CEO of Stormy Kromer. Stormy Kromer is an iconic Midwestern brand, and we're going to learn about its deep history and its ties to the railroad. We're also going to learn about how Gina's family has been running a cut and sew operation in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan since 1958. We're going to learn how they have adapted with the times and innovated to make their company sustainable and long lasting. Let's jump in and talk to Gina about her company. Thanks for joining us today. We have Gina from Stormy Kromer. She is the CEO leading this amazing American-made brand. Gina, thanks for joining us.
I'm very happy to be here.
Well, let's just dive right in. Tell us a little bit about Stormy Kromer. But before we get to there, tell us about your background. How did you get to leading Stormy Kromer today?
It's quite a story, and there's a kind of a story of two businesses. My family started in the sewing business with my grandfather in the late 50s. So I was a kid who grew up in a family business, entrepreneurial grandfather, father, and we were sewing just a lot of just odd stuff for different people who needed a sewn product. So I grew up in that environment in a very small town. However, at that time, I wanted nothing to do to do with the family business or this very small town in a very remote part of Michigan. And so I had a whole first part of my career that was in nonprofit arts administration. I lived in Dallas, Texas, very far away from Michigan's Upper Peninsula, and I worked for about 12 years for a nonprofit that brought arts programming into public schools, and it was very near and dear to my heart, and I loved it. I loved the work, but I very much missed the Midwest. And so in 2009, I called up my dad, and after years of saying I would never come back to be a part of the family business, I asked him what it would be like if I did come back. And so I've been back since 2009. I started here in customer service and working through that, and then over a very long, many-year transition to become CEO, which happened in 2022. And our company bought Stormy Kromer in 2001. So it's a brand that we acquired and brought into our operations, and it has its own long and rich history. So I can tell you about that when the time is right.
Awesome. Well, your background is incredibly diverse. My wife has a background in arts administration too, so very
That's awesome.
near and dear to my heart and us. And it's cool to see that you made that transition from arts administration, which I think a lot of people may dismiss and say, arts administration, what is that? For anybody who really knows what arts administration is, I think anybody in that world is, they're some of the hardest working people because they are dealing with underfunded programs and doing work of saints. So thank you for your work and what you did there. And appreciate you sharing your background on how you got to where you are today. So let's dissect the anatomy of the businesses real quick.
Yeah.
So tell us first about your family's business, the cut and sew operation.
Yes.
Do you guys own other brands? Do you still do contract manufacturing for other companies as well?
Yes, we still do contract manufacturing. Most of that work it's not apparel. It's a lot more industrial in nature. Um, And that at one point that was all that we did. Now that business is about a quarter of what we do, and then the rest is Stormy Kromer. But for instance, we make covers for a company called Boss Snowplow. They're owned by the Toro company, so we make covers for them. There's another great company called Rainbow Play Systems. These are those big cedar swing sets people have in their backyard, right? They're made in America, and we make the little awnings and flags and punching bags and anything that's sewn as a part of those sets we make. So it's things like that tend to be like vinyl, canvas, bigger scale is kind of the sorts of things that we do on the contract manufacturing side.
Very, very interesting.
Mhm.
And that's been around, you said
58, 1958.
1958. Wow. And how has that transformed over the years? Have you guys always done industrial commercial stuff, or has it kind of transitioned, throughout the different economic cycles?
Yeah, it was early on, it was a lot more small custom things and things like when I was a little girl, my dad was reupholstering people's furniture, right? That sort of thing, making custom boat covers. So it was a lot more kind of a small canvas shop, custom in nature. And my dad honestly was doing a boat cover for someone who lived in Florida but had a boat up here in the summer. And he was a um, my mind is blank. He was an chiropractor. Sorry, the word escapes me. He was a chiropractor, and he was starting a catalog because this was back in like the 80s, right? For like pre-internet, he was starting a catalog of supplies for chiropractic offices and even some to be direct to consumer. And so we asked my dad if he had ever sewn anything at larger scale. And my dad said, well, no, but I'm up for it, the classic entrepreneur. And so kind of the first contract thing or larger scale production thing we did was those round pillows that kind of go behind your lower back or maybe around your neck for just different back issues that you have. And so we made those. For a long time, we made dog beds for a very large catalog company as well that eventually got bought out by someone else and doesn't exist anymore. So it kind of started from this small custom stuff, and then my dad always has this philosophy, and I think it's still very true, that if you show up on time and you do what you say you're going to do, opportunity comes to you, right? And so he made all these great relationships and got all these opportunities to slowly do larger and larger scale things. And like we started the business in my great grandfather's grocery store building that was just a little storefront. And now we're in like 80,000 square feet in our industrial park. So just over time, that expansion and growth happened.
That's fantastic. It's such an entrepreneurial story, throughout the generations, and how everybody's been involved in taking it and growing it in their own way. And I think you said something, especially in today's age. If you show up, you do a nice job, and you're nice and respectful, people share their experience with you, and it's like, wow, they did what they said they were going to do within the time period that they were supposed to.
Right.
Let's go with them. So and what's that company called?
Jacquart fabric products.
Jacquart Fabric
Yeah.
Products. Okay, so we've learned about Jacquart Fabric Products. Let's transition into Stormy Kromer, which is something that I think the general public would be more familiar with.
Right.
Very iconic in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And you said that brand came to you guys in 2001. You
Mhm.
acquired it, and it became part of the Jacquart
Yes.
Fabric family product. How does that look? Give us a little bit of history of Stormy Kromer prior to you guys acquiring it, and how that acquisition started to happen.
Yeah. So I have to tell you the story of even how the brand started. So Stormy Kromer is the name of a person. His name was George. Apparently, he had a very wild temper, and so his nickname was Stormy. And he lived in the Green Bay, Wisconsin area, turn of the previous century. And he was a baseball player who met a lovely young woman that he fell in love with. He wanted to marry her. Her father said, "You can't marry her until you get a real job." And so he started to work on the railroad and married Ida. And the legend with the creation of the hat is the thing we are most known for, is that he lost one too many hats on the train, and he came home one night and had an old wool baseball cap. and asked his wife Ida to make some modifications to it. Another classic, entrepreneurial, necessity is the mother of invention kind of story. And then he wore his hat on the railroad, and some of his coworkers said, "Hey, I'd like one of those." And so she made a few more and a few more, and suddenly they have a factory in Milwaukee making these hats. Um, when I was a kid, old men, let's say, wore those hats up here. And they were very like lots of people wore them. We all knew what they were. And there was a local shop that sold them here. A couple of places actually that sold them, but one of the places was a ski and bike shop, but they also sold these hats. And so they called Milwaukee and we're going to place an order. And they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're not making those anymore." By this time, the Kromer Cap Company had made these other hats. I think if I describe them, people will think of them. They're usually thin cotton. They're often either like red with white polka dots or American flag fabric, and like welders would wear them oftentimes under their welding gear. So they were making tons of those, and they really weren't making the wool winter cap. They weren't selling a lot of them. So this gentleman who owned the shop here in town knew my dad, marched over here, wanted to see my dad. He wasn't in. He left a note on my dad's chair that said, "The Kromer cap is going away. You should do something about it." And so it's like not even a great business story. My dad bought the rights to a hat that someone else was going to stop making because the sales weren't very good. But it had a kind of a, I hate to use the word cult, but kind of like a strong following in this part of the country. And my dad just thought, well, we can just make some of those during one of our slower periods. We just put them on the shelf and sell them in the winter, and that'll be great. Um, but I guess we didn't entirely realize the brand love, even when the brand was back then and kind of just a hat. And so yeah, we've owned it since 2001 and have just added all the other vests and coats and mittens and quarter zips and all the other things have been added, variations on the hat, since we've owned it. So kind of went from just this one hat to hopefully a whole product line that makes sense for people.
I think that is one of the more entrepreneurial stories we've heard from people on this podcast. Buying something that everybody is telling you, like, "Hey, look, we're not making this anymore because it wasn't selling," and your dad being like, "Well, I think it's still a great opportunity.
Right.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna make something out of it." That is a hallmark entrepreneur,
Yep.
and I think it shows your dad's character and his belief
Yeah.
in the product. So really interesting to see. And I want to touch on the railroad aspect a little bit
Yeah.
more. So was this popular with railroaders specifically?
It was actually like we've heard, one of the things that's great about this brand is that it's just so rich in stories, and so many people will want to share their stories or the little tidbits that they know, and got all these old photos. And one of the stories that we've heard repeatedly is that as you traveled, you might be away from home for some time as you're working on the train and as it's traveling to different areas. And when railroad workers maybe spent a night in a strange town and they were looking for the right tavern to hang out in, they would peek their head into the place and say, "Are there any six pointers in here?" Because the hat was a six panel hat that came together, 6 points in the middle. And that's how they knew that there would be fellow railroad workers that they might have something in common with, and that it would probably be an okay place to sit down and relax for the evening. So it definitely was something that became a part of that culture.
One of the earlier companies that we talked to, you may be familiar with them, Red Ox.
Yeah.
They make bags, and one of their earlier products was designed for railroad men. They're based in Billings, Montana, which is a big railroad town,
Right.
and their bags were known by people who worked on the railroad for being incredibly durable, long lasting bags that everybody had to have. And so it's interesting, and that's not the only example of the railroad
Right.
we've heard, but it shows, as you talk about American made and American made products, the railroad, was a big part of the American economy for such a long time and still is in so many ways. But in the early and mid 19th century. It was such an
Hmm.
important part of how the United States was connected. So
Yeah.
really cool to see that
Yeah.
that connection there as well. I want to touch now on your journey to become CEO of
Sure.
Stormy Kromer. So you said you moved back in 2009,
Hmm.
called your dad, and were like, I lied. I want to be part of the family business. I'm sure the conversation was a little bit more tactful and meaningful than that. But tell us how that went. What was his reaction? Where did you start, and what does
Hmm.
your journey with Stormy Kromer look like over the past,
Yeah.
now 15 years?
Yeah, he was shocked, like, because I had been so vehement, like, no, this is never going to happen. So he was pretty shocked, but very happy. And I really wanted to be a part of what he had done, my grandfather had done, employing people here. We're in a pretty small town. We employ 65 people. Like, that's meaningful, right? In a town of under 5,000 people. Like, that's a important part of the community. And I wanted to be a part of that. And I wanted to be a part of making sure that continued. And so I started, and then, honestly, the other phone call I made, after my dad was my sister. My sister had always worked in the business. She's a couple years younger than me. And I wanted to make sure that me coming back was good for her too, because I didn't want to ruin our sister relationship. The family business is a whole thing in and of itself. And so I said, hey, so I talked to dad and I'm thinking about coming back and being a part of the company, but I want to make sure that would be okay with you. And she was like, how fast can you be here? So it was very good. She was excited. Um, and I started as our customer service manager, and I came back and I sat in a cubicle and I answered phones and I entered orders and I managed two other people. And I think that it was pretty important for me to come back and start not with some super high job within the company. I think I gained a pretty decent amount of respect from folks for doing that. And I learned a ton about the company. Like, I knew somewhat about the company, obviously, and I would still talk to my dad about it, even when I lived, 1,000 miles away. But I just got a deeper understanding. Everything goes through customer service, right? Like, so you end up having to interact with every aspect of the business. Stormy Kromer was in the business, but it was very, very small. And there was a woman kind of leading the marketing and sales for that. And about a year or so after I came back, she moved on to an opportunity in a different town. And so that kind of the leadership of Stormy Kromer became something that was open. And so I stepped into that role. And so for most of my time that I've been back, I've been real focused on the sales, the marketing, and the product development for Stormy Kromer. Now, I had done marketing as a part of my arts management life. That was a big part of what I did for certain parts of my time. Um, and I wouldn't call myself a salesperson, but I am a relationship person, and that's how we do sales here. But I literally knew nothing about product development, or like designing plaids, or like, let's make a new hat. So that was interesting. And I just figured that out as we went along. And yeah, so over that time, Stormy Kromer sort of gradually grew, and grew as a percent of the overall business within our company. And then I would say in about 2018, we lost our big contract, which was making dog beds, at that time they had gone online, but a big company. And it was like, there had been all these things where we were making products for other people. And they came here and said, I'm really sorry, you're a best supplier, but we have to take this overseas because we have to save money. And like, literally people crying in our conference room because they had to end our relationship. And then this big customer of ours gets sold to a very, very big brand, and they just close this division essentially. And we're like, man, we need to be more in control of our own destiny. And that's when we started to put even more effort into Stormy Kromer, because we're like, okay, yes, we could lose a customer here and there for Stormy Kromer, but no one can come in here and say, oh, we're taking Stormy Kromer overseas, or, like, it's ours. We control our destiny a lot more. And so then we really began to focus and put a little bit more fuel under the growth of Stormy Kromer. And I would say for like from that time until 22, my dad and I were kind of like, he was doing this and I was doing this much work. And then it's sort of like just over those 5 years, kind of slowly did this. And so on the official day when we officially handed things over, it didn't really feel like that momentous because it had just been happening kind of over time. My dad is still like a very active, very young feeling 72-year-old. So he's here all the time. If someone came here and took our factory tour, it's very likely that my dad, Bob Jacquart, would give you the tour. He loves to do that. But he's still here for me too to talk about strategic things, financial aspects, the big decisions. Our family is the ownership of the company. My mom, my dad, my sister, and I. And so we still make all those kinds of ownership level decisions together. And so it's just great having him. And yeah, I also do sew myself, and that's that's hugely important in my role and over time, just because I can't do what our very talented people do, but I can understand it, right? And I can understand when they're having a challenge, and I can understand that maybe it would be better to construct this garment in this way versus this way. So yeah, that's been a part of my journey too, is that I do that in my spare time, and it's something that I enjoy. Um, but I'm able to then speak the language of the manufacturing team here as well, which is hugely important.
It's such a story of a family business, and I want to touch on a couple of things because
Sure.
there's some things that would be helpful to understand. Your sister, what does she do in the company? What's her role in the business? Because it sounds like she also is an owner of the
Yep.
business as well.
Yeah, she currently she buys all of our raw materials. So she's purchasing all the wool, all the fabrics, all of that sort of thing. So it's a pretty big job and she does a great job with it. For years she had been the main contact for our big dog bed client. So that was a big transition for her when that business went away. Um, and we're very like, what needs to be done? Our whole family is like that. Well, what needs to be done? And at that time we had a gap in purchasing, and she's like, well, I'll figure it out. Like, that sounds like a great role for me. One of the things that's nice about the two of us is that she is a much more of a behind the scenes kind of person. She doesn't really want to be like the face of the company. She would not want to be doing this kind of thing. So it's been good for us to have skills that complement each other and to not feel like we're competing against each other either.
That's such an important aspect of any family business. Even if you do have those competing skills, it's making sure that that those lines are defined and clear, so
Mm-hmm.
that you're not working over each other and having
Right.
that competition. I have two brothers, grew up in a family business. We can all get competitive. It's part of the nature of having siblings
Yes.
is being competitive in some way, shape, or form. So it's fantastic that you guys were able to put in those boundaries and that your skill sets are just naturally different.
Yeah.
Want to touch on your point about sewing and being on the line. One of the things that we've heard a bunch from different American manufacturers and people in the cut and sew industry or any type of manufacturing is the way that they can help save on costs. One of the ways they can help save on costs is just making sure that their operation is set up super efficiently. And would be interesting to get your take on. Not many people we've talked to have the skills to actually be on the line, even if their skills aren't up to some of the top tradesmen or tradeswomen in and on the floor. Do you think that's been an asset for you to be able to say, hey, look, I not only see what you're doing, but I've done it, maybe at a lower quality or a lower level or lower efficiency, but I can empathize with some of the challenges that you're facing, and now we can take this and we can say, okay, this is how we can increase efficiency in our operation and try to be as efficient as possible to save on costs. Because the reality is, it is more expensive. Labor is more expensive. There's
Yes.
more insurance. There's more regulation.
More everything.
More everything, and so you can't get around that. At least not in a way that is legal and sustainable. And so the way that you can save is often through efficiency and workflow gains. Do you think your experience there is beneficial and has helped you guys find some of those different efficiency gains?
I'll be honest, like I don't get involved in that aspect very much. We have people that are much more in tuned to how to gain efficiencies than me, including my dad. My dad's a way better sewing machine operator than I could ever be. He's fantastic. Um, so I don't use I think where some of my expertise or my understanding of that piece of it comes a little bit more when we're creating new products, so that we create things from right from the get go that are going to be, that are constructed in such a way that we're setting our people up for success in the efficiency aspect, right? That we aren't overly, what's one of the challenges with American cut and sew and especially apparel, we can't overbuild things. Like I'm not going to make you something with 8 pockets because every pocket costs kind of a lot, right? And so I think it's my input comes a little bit more at the front end as we're developing products. I will say, like, and I don't know if some of your other manufacturers that you've talked to have talked about um, what they experienced during the COVID years, but we were one of those businesses that we were really busy during COVID, and we got into the whole PPE and all of that, and we were working 6 days a week just to keep up. And when we were doing that, I worked on the line making masks with my team, and kind of like a lot of hours of the week. And I think that's also a kind of area where it's like I was willing to do that, and people could see me doing it, and they could see me like not complaining about it, right? Like just out there with them. So sometimes I think I'm not so much of an operations focused CEO. I'm much more of a product development, business development CEO. But the fact that those folks know I could if I had to, just that alone is a pretty good motivator and a pretty good, like, it helps a lot.
Lots of respect, I'm sure,
Yeah.
on the floor, on the manufacturing floor, seeing you out there and,
Yeah.
as you said, doing the job, but not only doing the job, but happily doing the job,
Right.
not complaining about it. Well, let's move on here. I think there's a lot to talk about, and want to make sure we have time for all
Hmm.
of it. So you said that one of the things that you've been doing is leading the product development of Stormy Kromer. Want to understand how you guys took it from one hat to now. If someone goes onto your website, there is a whole array of products
Yeah.
that's Stormy Kromer, and they all fit the same. They're all the same genre of clothing.
Right.
They all look the same, and I love it, especially being from the Midwest. It's very Midwest,
Yes.
warm, cozy, comfy clothing. Tell us about that process. When you came in 2009, were you guys still only having just the Stormy Kromer hat?
Hmm.
And then how have you guys added products, and what is the decision making metric that you go through to say, hey, should we add this? Should we not? And then taking it to the final product.
Yeah. When I came back, it was there were a few things beyond the hats, and there certainly were. Oh, we can work in. Let's make a wax canvas hat, and in addition to wool and different colors, and there was things like the kind of very classic wool vest. Some of those very simple key pieces were in the line. Um, there was really not hardly anything for women at the time when I came back. So women's products was a big point of emphasis. We're just thinking, hey, we're leaving half the population. We're leaving them out of this, right? They need to be warm too. And in fact, there's a great story. We have a hat called the pedal pusher cap. That it looks like a Stormy Kromer, but it has a wool flower on it. That the idea was actually my mom's, who she doesn't work in the business anymore, but she had this idea, and it ended up for many years it was our third best selling product. So the process, it's hard. The process, it's not as straightforward or like direct as you might think. I mean, part of it, very quite frankly, is what are we capable of doing, right? Because we want to be manufacturing in the US. The very first thing is like, what are our capabilities, and what can we pivot to do, and what else could we manufacture at a price point that makes sense? So obviously, as we expand into coats and vests and like this piece, we expanded into pet products, right? Oh, can we engineer a hat for dogs? Sure, let's figure that out. We can do dog jackets. We can so it's every season. So we do have now lighter weight caps for spring and summer. So we have 2 seasons of development. We work about 18 months ahead of time. And we do have someone now who is that is responsible for the design. She does some other stuff too. We all wear many hats here, no pun intended. So Jamie will kind of start the development process by getting input from the team, internal team here. We have outside sales reps that work with our wholesale customers. So we'll survey them. What have they heard from our customers that they're looking for? What are their ideas of categories we could expand into? So that first part of the process is really just like ideation and where are some gaps that we might be able to fill. And then one of the other things that I love about our setup is that my same people who are making hats to be sold are also like making our prototypes and making our first passes at design. And they're across the parking lot for me. Like they're not a world away, right? They're right there. And so we start just experimenting and start working on patterns for things that we're excited about. We have a whole group that will review them, take a look at them. The costing part, comes kind of soon because it's a reality to say like this is a great thing, but I just don't think anyone's going to pay $400 for it. Like, so that's like when you talked about what makes the cut, some of it comes down to that. Like, what do we think is sellable at this price point that we have to get, right, to have the margin and to go forward? And so it's all of those kinds of different inputs. And every year we kind of see what's left at the end of that whole process. What are the things that make it to go forward? We're always, the easy thing is always to add new colors, new patterns of existing products. And so we're always, we have our core colors that stay all the time. Black, charcoal, red, black, plaid are always in our line. And then we have colors that kind of come and go. And we're by no means fast fashion. We're quite slow fashion, actually, but we do want to have pops of color and interest that come and go as time goes on, in addition to our classics.
Yeah, absolutely. Great way to drive some additional purchases from loyal customers too. Limited time fabric.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times I've done that when a shirt is like, "Yeah, this is only here for a little bit." I'm like, I'm gonna regret it if I don't do this. So let's
right.
do that. The process and the Stormy Kromer brand is so iconic, so Midwestern. Absolutely love it. I want to talk and pivot a little bit about some of the challenges that both Stormy Kromer and then also just the cut and sew operation in general have had it. Since 1958, you guys have been around for a while and ups and downs all over. The question that I'm about to ask is about challenges that Stormy Kromer and then the bigger business as a whole have had. And I'll let you decide how you want to answer this. If you want to focus on something that has happened during your tenure as CEO, or as anybody who has grown up in a family business, just as well as a 14-year-old when there's ups and downs in the business. I think it's something that's unique to people and kids who have grown up in a family business. There is very clear indication within the family and just everybody's general mood. When things are going great, you can tell, and when things are challenges are happening or there's setbacks, you can also tell. So going through your memory is both being involved with the business and then CEO. What are 2 or 3 of the biggest challenges that you guys have had to overcome? And how did you take those and then turn it into something that's allowed you to thrive and grow?
Yeah. I mean, losing that large customer that we were producing dog beds for was pretty devastating. Like, could have been extremely devastating. And it was, it kind of saw it coming, but didn't know when it was going to happen. And it was a multi-million-dollar blow to revenue, which is, massive, right? And I think, we obviously you tighten your belts and you look for any opportunity to cut, but you also can't cripple your business, right, and cut so deep that basic operations cease. And I think one of the things that my dad always, his perspective was, we never targeted a certain industry with our cut and sew. It was just like, if it is fabric and thread that has to be cut up and then sewn back together, we can do it, right? We're going to figure it out. And so, and the other thing is my dad is, how they have this, say the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, Like, really, it should be the 7 degrees of Bob Jacquart. The man is like so well connected. He's the best networker I know. And we just started making phone calls. Who do you know that might need a sewn product? Who do you know that could be a customer of ours? Um, and it was just really like hard work, but our people, we had people that had, made a dog bed their whole career here. And we're like, you got to go learn how to make a Stormy Kromer hat. Like, we got to get you on this other machine. It's very different. The tolerances are different. Like, if a dog bed is a quarter of an inch smaller than it's supposed to be, no one really knows, and it's kind of okay, right? But if a hat is a quarter of an inch smaller, it's like two sizes. So, you know, we had people that were willing to pivot and learn new skills, sit at a different machine, learn a different operation. And it's that kind of like, we're just pretty scrappy as a company. It's the same way when we, COVID could have been devastating to us. And I'm not, this isn't a political statement. It's just that Michigan was pretty locked down in comparison to other states. And, so we had to we sent people home, and we're like, oh, what are we going to do? And 2 days later, we got a call from the UW-Madison health system asking if we could make masks. And again, we never made a mask in our life. But a crew of us came in here on a Sunday, worked all day, made patterns, went through our supplier list. Who can we get this, that, and the other from? My husband drove the prototype 2 hours south to meet this guy, like halfway between where we are and Madison. And in 3 days, we had reconfigured the factory to make masks. And it literally saved our company, right? And so I think those are like huge challenges that have come up, but our ability to be scrappy, to be creative, and to not say, well, we've already always done it this way, so we have to keep doing it this way, are some of the things that have helped us get through those really challenging times.
It sounds like, and feel free to comment on this as well, but it sounds like one of the ways that, you know, you and Stormy Kromer and everybody are able to be so scrappy, as you called it, is because you guys are your family, right? Like, this is truly a family business. So it's not, you're not sitting here and saying, well, it's not the worst thing ever. Like, we can figure X, Y, and Z out. It is personal. It's been around since 1958. It's part of the family, and so it's like, look, we are going to do whatever we have to. If I have to make masks,
Right.
I'm making masks.
Right.
If I'm driving 18 hours across the country because I need to go get fabric, I'm getting in the car, and that's what we're doing.
Right.
It sounds like you, and then your dad and your sister, your mom, and all your spouses as well, all kind of have that mentality of, look, we're going to get this done.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, I've read some things lately in like on LinkedIn or in business things that like that people don't like this word that, your family is work, because people like kind of use it as a manipulation to get more out of you. Like, that's not how we think of it here. Like, literally, some of these people, like, there's a woman on our sewing machine line who was at my high school graduation. That's how long she's worked here, right? Like, that's family. I'm sorry. Like, and we have, we have people, like, the amount of people we have that have worked here 20 plus years is kind of staggering. And we are in it together, right? And we are figuring it out. And the amount of people here who have done 10 different jobs during their time here and have grown or changed or learned something new. Yeah, that's just what you do. And I think there's also in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan has a very large Finnish background, a lot of immigrants from Finland in this area. And there's a Finnish word called sisu that sort of means, there's no really direct translation into English, but it essentially means like keeping going when all hope is lost. And I would say that word, it permeates our culture and our communities here, and that's part of what keeps Stormy Kromer going as well. Is that drive that's in us. I mean, if you're going to live in a place like this that can get 200 to 300 inches of snow a year and be happy about it, you're a certain kind of person who doesn't give up.
All right, as we wrap up here, Gina, want to touch on your favorite American-made products other than Stormy Kromer. I'm sure you love your Stormy Kromer hats and outerwear. What are some of those things that you just can't live without?
I love and value American made footwear. And so I'll give two of my favorites a shout out. I have a pair of Wolverine 1,000 Mile boots that I've had probably pushing 10 years. Um, and they look like they would give you no support, and they are my favorite shoes to wear at trade shows. They're finally starting to break in really beautifully. I know that someday when I wear out the soles, I can get them resold. They're just fabulous. They look great with everything. And in the last year, I got a pair of work boots from Thorogood, and they're made just down the road from us, about 2.5 hours in central Wisconsin. Man, when I first put those things on, I was like, this is like wearing like iron. Like, they're serious. I'm finally getting them broken in just enough to be comfortable, but I can just already tell that these boots I'm gonna have and be like in the garden when I'm 80 wearing these boots still. Like, they're serious. So I think the idea of like investing in a $300 or $400 boot like that you know you're going to literally have for probably 30 to 40 years. I love that idea. I think they look better every year as they age and get worn in, and I just love that.
It's a labor of love. We've heard some other people mention Thorogood. And one person was like, well, I put them on and they were super uncomfy. And then I realized that like these are heavy duty boots that are meant to last, and I just got to wear them and break them in.
Yep.
So great to hear that you love those as well. And again, buying quality rather than you could buy $150 pair of boots that you'd have to replace five, six,
Right.
7, 8 times in the next 20 years. So.
Yep.
Quality is more expensive up front, but has a great runtime
Absolutely.
and cost per use. Well, Gina, it's been such a fantastic conversation. As we wrap up here, I want to give you one more chance just to say anything about Stormy Kromer, manufacturing in America, and kind of the story of your family's business and what you guys have done.
I said this in a video that someone did on us recently, but I truly believe that the care and pride and love, I will say the word love, that my employees put into sitting at their sewing machine and making every hat, I truly believe that comes out in the finished product. Like, I think you feel that when you wear our stuff. Um, and just like the boots that we talked about, people pass on their Stormy Kromer hat to their grandchildren. Like, it is an investment when you buy American. I know that sometimes this initial sticker price can be like, oh man, do I really need to buy a $50 hat? Do you really need to buy five $10 hats? Right. And so I think it's really great that people like you, and that I think people in general are starting to really come around to that and think about um, investments in things and keeping things out of the landfill and buying things that are going to last, and maybe things that can be repaired and have a patch on them, and that's kind of like a badge of honor. So I just love what you're doing, Ben, and talking about this. And I would encourage folks to check us out online on social media. And if you find yourself in Michigan's beautiful Upper Peninsula, we are here always loving to give tours and show people that there isn't a giant hat making machine that you send fabric in one end and get a hat out the other, but there are, our friends and neighbors sitting at sewing machines, very much like you might have in your home, and really putting their love and care into each hat. So we'd love to have folks come see us.
And I'll give one more shout out just to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. If you haven't been there, this is the perfect excuse to get up there. Summer, fall, spring in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is absolutely gorgeous. And if you want to brave the winter, it's okay in the winter too. So, Gina, thanks again for the time. It's been such a great conversation, and appreciate all you're doing to grow the Stormy Kromer brand and um, you know build in America. Thank you so much.